There have been a lot of conspiracies in history. Some of them, of course, you've never heard about because a successful conspiracy is usually one that's kept quiet. But there have been some spectacular failures of conspiracies, and I reached out and grabbed 4 of them as an example because they were all assassination attempts, and our text this morning in the book of Acts will be about an assassination attempt. And so let's briefly look at these 4. In 1605, the famous gunpowder plot, an attempt to blow up British Parliament by putting barrels of gunpowder underneath it and during a session to set it off. It was headed by a man named Guy Fawkes, and it was betrayed by one of the conspirators. There were a number of men involved in this plot, but one of them had second thoughts, decided that blowing up a building full of people was probably not a moral thing to do, and so he told the authorities, and they caught Guy Fawkes red-handed. In 1776, you might not have heard of this one. Someone you will know, of course, a man named George Washington had a bodyguard named Thomas Hickey. Thomas Hickey was involved in a plot to assassinate George Washington. Unfortunately for Thomas, he was the kind of guy that bragged about what he was going to do before he did it, and somebody said, gee, we should probably tell people about that, and he was tried for treason and executed. Not smart, that Thomas Hickey, apparently. In 1861, known as the Baltimore plot, there was an assassination plot underway to kill Abraham Lincoln. This was just after he was elected. They were going to do a tour of cities and speeches and all of that. Someone shared the news of this, a famous detective, a man named Alan Pinkerton. He later founded the group called the Pinkertons that had a big role in American history at this time. He found out about it, and they changed Lincoln's schedule and avoided the plot. And then lastly, on July 20th of 1944, the Valkyrie plot, it's been made into a movie, an assassination attempt to kill Adolf Hitler. It went off. They had a significant bomb inside a bunker, but because the bomb was placed next to the table leg of this thick hardwood table, it absorbed most of the blast, and even though Hitler was wounded, he was not killed, and all the conspirators were rounded up, and most of them were shot. Conspiracies are one of those things that can unravel quickly, and they are difficult to pull off. In our text this morning, we're returning to the book of Acts, to Luke's account of the early history of the church. We started this some time ago. It's been most of a year since we've been in Acts. I keep track of the messages that I've preached, the texts that I've already done, and I don't like having unfinished business with a text. I want to finish an entire book at some point. So we're going back to Acts. We're picking up where we left off, and I'll give you a reminder where we left off in case your memory's not ironclad or in case you weren't here when we were there. And it was in chapter 23. We left off with verse 12. And I'll give you the synopsis in a moment. It says, "The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they'd killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priest and the elders and said, 'We've taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we've killed Paul.'" So let's back up. It says the next morning. This would be the day after the commander of the Roman garrison of Jerusalem, he'll be in our text this morning, a man named Claudius. He had taken Paul into protective custody because a mob in the temple area had tried to tear him apart and kill him. They accused Paul of bringing a Gentile into the temple courts, where they would have been banned. There were signs on the walls saying, if you go past here and you're a Gentile, it's the death penalty. And they accused Paul of taking a Gentile in there. Of course, he didn't do it, but they accused him of that as a pretext to get rid of him because he was ministering to Gentiles, because he was saying that God had a message for Gentiles. And the people behind this were zealots. They were Jewish nationalists who believed in their nation above others, and they didn't like this message coming from Paul. And so they tried to kill him. The commander took him into protective custody, and then they went out to the crowd to try to figure out what's going on. They had a conversation. Paul talked to the crowd. That ended with a second riot. And so this is the next day after that second riot. We see a conspiracy being formed. And a conspiracy is a pretty simple thing. It's more than one person agreeing to work together for some sort of goal. They come up with how we're going to go after this goal and what we're going to do. Not all conspiracies, of course, are evil. You could conspire to do something good, although the question would be, why are you conspiring in secret to do something good? But I suppose if this was a repressive regime, maybe you're living in Soviet Russia back in the day, you have to conspire in order to do something good because the government is out to get you, or there are other forces that you got to worry about. So perhaps, but most of the time, a conspiracy is in secret because it is immoral, because it's illegal, because it's something that you don't want people to know about. Well, why conspire? Why bring other people in on your plot, in on your plan? For the simple reason that it's usually something one person can't do by themselves. No one of these people, of these 40 people, would have been able to assassinate Paul on their own. And so they got together, like-minded people who wanted to see him dead. They get together. And when you have a group together, especially if it's a group gathered for a fanatical purpose, you often have what we see as a mob mentality. People willing to do, as a part of a group, something they wouldn't do on their own. Hard to say if that's part of what's going on here. But they take an oath. They say, we are this serious. We will not eat, we will not drink until he is dead. In other words, we're going to kill him today or tomorrow, but soon. Right? This is not a plan for 6 months from now, because you wouldn't say, we won't eat or drink until he's dead. Notice when they repeated it, they dropped the drink. Maybe they were starting to rethink that and say, you know what? It is getting thirsty. I'm getting thirsty here. We can go a few days without eating, but you've got to have something to drink. There were 40 men. That's not a small number of people that wanted to see Paul dead. That tells you something about the attitude and about what was going on in Jerusalem at the time. It was like a powder keg. There was so much in the air that 40 men put their hand on it and said, I will help kill Paul. Notice that they didn't believe that Paul needed a trial. These are zealots. These are people that believe that they are right and that their cause is just, and so why do we need a trial? Just kill the man. He's a heretic. Kill him. Get rid of him. These are probably the same people that will be involved not much longer in the revolt against Rome. These are the kind of people that believed in their cause so much they were willing to take on the Roman Empire. Of course, that ended badly. Jerusalem was destroyed. It was the end of the Jewish nation for nearly 2,000 years. They have a plot, and they go to the chief priests and the elders because they realize that their plot won't work on their own. We're going to kill Paul, but Paul is in the fortress of the Roman garrison. We can't get in there, and as long as he stays in there, he's safe. So we need some pretext, some reason for him to come out in order to get rid of him. So they go to the chief priests and the elders. Notice this. They involve in their conspiracy men who have sworn to represent God to the people. A plot to murder someone in cold blood without a trial, and they go to the spiritual leaders of the nation for assistance. That's not a good sign, right? That's a frightening thought. What do they want the Sanhedrin to do? They say, now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We're ready to kill him before he gets here. So they want to use the religious authority to lie, to subvert justice. What is that if not blasphemy? To ask the religious authority, the religious leadership, to be a part of something immoral like this. It is an insult to God. It is blasphemy. Why do they want to kill Paul? Because they're accusing him of blasphemy. There's irony. In order to kill a man that they think is a blasphemous heretic, they're willing to commit blasphemy to kill him. That's how blinded they are by their hatred of Paul and what he represents. And they say, give us a pretext. In other words, lie. They don't need more information about Paul's case, right? They know exactly why they hate Paul, but they want the Sanhedrin to petition the commander so that they can pretend that they need more information. And while Paul and the soldiers are walking from the commander's fortress to the temple, it's a short walk through the streets of Jerusalem, they will jump out from behind doors and whatnot, right? And they will rush in and they will stab him to death and kill him. This ambush that they are planning is likely to get some of those Roman soldiers killed, isn't it? They're going to come running out of the shadows, brandishing knives, maybe swords. The Roman soldiers are going to fight back. They won't know what this is about. Some of them are going to get killed. And the Roman garrison is not going to sit still for that. The Roman commander will inevitably respond to this bloodshed with bloodshed of his own. This act of violence will get other people killed, probably innocent people. But they're willing to do that to get rid of Paul. They're willing to commit blasphemy by bringing the Sanhedrin into it. They're willing to murder not only Paul, but probably the soldiers around him, and they're willing to risk the reprisal. That's quite a conspiracy. It's quite a group of men. They found 40 people willing to sign on to that, and the leadership of the Sanhedrin. Now, we know the leadership of the Sanhedrin is not exactly upstanding citizens at this point, right? These are the same guys, many of them, that voted to condemn Jesus after a sham trial when they knew the witnesses were lying. So we know they're not exactly moral men, but they continue in their immorality. Fortunately, this is what happens. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. This is the only thing we have in the New Testament that tells us anything about Paul's family. We don't know about any of his immediate family except that he had a sister and hence a nephew. We don't know anything about this nephew. This is our only thing. And we shouldn't be surprised that when you start a conspiracy with 40 men and then you branch out and involve leadership of the Sanhedrin, somebody's going to overhear this that isn't on board. Somebody's going to say, whoa, what are they talking about? And it happened to be, maybe they didn't know that this was Paul's nephew, or maybe they thought Paul's nephew was on their side, because it seems quite likely that Paul's family would have disowned him when he began preaching that God wanted him to go to the Gentiles, that they would have said, that's a bridge too far. We weren't too happy about you saying Jesus is the Messiah, but this is too much. They probably disowned him. Yet this nephew, whatever else about him, whether he was a Christian or not, probably not, hard to say, he decided, as the proverbial saying goes, blood is thicker than water, that he was not going to let his uncle be murdered like this. And so he goes and shares that information with Paul. Who better to tell than Paul? Paul's the one they're trying to kill. Let Paul figure out what to do about it. And here is Paul's response. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he's something to tell you. We know that Paul is in protective custody. He's within the fortress, and so it wouldn't have been hard at all to find a centurion. There would have been several of them there. He says, take him to the commander. This is the same man that intervened to save Paul's life a few days ago, and yet this is also the same man that has no idea why they want Paul dead. Tell him what you have to say. Go right to the commander. Paul doesn't want to just tell a centurion, and he might say, oh, that's not real. We'll be fine. We'll handle it. We're soldiers. It's not a problem. Tell him directly. Well, what will the commander do? Verses 19 to 21. The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They've taken an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him. They're ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander knows that when a young Jewish man comes to him with information, that he ought to take him aside. All right? This has got to be something important, because normally a Jewish person would not go to a Roman with news. It's just not the way you do it. They're an occupying army. They're the foreigners. They're roundly hated by most people. And so he takes him aside quietly and hears the tale. And I think hearing about the ambush was enough, because the ambush tells him not only is Paul's life in danger, but my soldiers' lives are in danger. He is their commander. He is not going to let this happen. So he's got a plan, and here it comes, verse 22. The commander dismissed the young man with this warning: "Don't tell anyone that you've reported this to me." I'll file this away under, "Yeah, I already knew that." All right? There is no chance that this nephew is going to go around to the tavern, to the restaurant, and say, "Oh, by the way, there was a plot against my uncle, but I foiled it by going to the Roman commander." That's just somewhere between stupid and idiotic, because he's going to end up with a knife in his back, dead before the end of the night. All right? You don't tell people that you are a collaborator with the Romans, even if it is an immoral act that you're stopping, even if it is your family that you're protecting. You keep that quiet. So he didn't need to be told to keep it quiet. The commander, looking out for him, tells him what he already knew. Here's what he's going to do. Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He gets a detachment, and there's some issue with the translation as to whether or not these are spearmen or these are the spare horses for the guys. But anyway, there was a lot of soldiers. We needed 2 centurions, probably as many as 470 of them. I think the commander is taking this warning very seriously. He is not going to allow a Roman citizen to be assassinated in his custody. How would that look for his career? You let a Roman be murdered under your control. That's not going to happen. And he's certainly not going to put his own men at risk. So he sends this large detachment. This is probably up to half of the garrison, from what we understand about how many Roman soldiers there were in Jerusalem. About half of them are being sent on this mission. Notice that they are going to Caesarea. That's 65 miles away on the northwest of here, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It's the capital of the province, of this Roman province. It is thus far removed from the hotbed of Jewish nationalism that Jerusalem is, and it is a much safer place for Paul to be. So step 1 is get him far away from here. Step 2, send almost 500 soldiers to protect him on the way. And the third thing, go tonight. Don't wait till tomorrow morning, because if you wait till tomorrow morning, they might attack during while we're leaving Jerusalem in the narrow streets, or they might set up an ambush on the roads through the hills. We're leaving tonight. We're going with a whole bunch of soldiers, and this will be the end of it. He definitely took this warning seriously. And so he sends Paul to Caesarea with a letter. It says this: he wrote a letter as follows: Claudius Lysias, to his excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of the plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. We're told that this was the kind of letter that he sent. Obviously, Luke wouldn't have seen the actual letter, but Paul knows what was in the letter because he's going to talk to Governor Felix in the next chapter. And so the letter says basically what's been happening, right? That Paul was seized by the Jews. Now, picture Governor Felix, right? He's reading this letter. A prisoner or someone in protective custody has been sent to him that was attacked by the Jews. Number one, he's going to say, yawn, right? Who cares, right? Not, why are you sending him to me? They were about to kill him. Okay, so it's serious, right? We don't let them kill people. We let them administer their own justice, but as Romans, we reserve capital punishment. That's, of course, why they had to send Jesus to Pilate, right? And so that might get his attention a little bit. And then the last part of the sentence will be what gets Felix listening. He's a Roman citizen. Now I'm listening. Why are they trying to kill a Roman citizen? I'm going to want to know that. Rome does not let its citizens be mistreated, let alone killed. It's bad for your reputation. You don't let that kind of thing happen. Now notice that Claudius said, I rescued him because I knew he was a Roman citizen. That's not exactly what happened, right? He rescued Paul at first because there was a riot going on and he wanted peace and order. Then he learned he was a Roman citizen. This makes Claudius look a little bit better because it means it puts his duty to protect Roman citizens at the forefront. So this is a guy writing a letter to his boss about what happened that makes him look good. Would any of you do that? Of course not. You would say just the facts, ma'am, right? You would never shade the story to make yourself look good. But that's what Claudius did. I don't fault him for that because he's bothering the governor with this and he wants to make sure that it goes out well for him. He says, I want to know why they were accusing him, because he still wants to know. He has no idea what they're fighting about. It's some argument about their law. And frankly, the Romans didn't give a fig about Jewish law. They thought it was incomprehensible. They thought the arguments the Jews had were ridiculous and nonsense. They were monotheists, for crying out loud. They believed there was only one God. In the Roman mind, these guys were lit nuts. So normally they left Jewish law alone. You guys do your stuff. We don't care. Don't tell us about it. We don't want to know. So when he learned that it was a question about their law, he realized, okay, I got no idea, right? Who cares? I don't understand it. It's out of my league. But he does say there was no charge. I couldn't understand why they wanted to kill him. It didn't make any sense. Why do they want him dead? Basically, Claudius is passing the mystery on to Felix. I came across this situation. I give up. I don't know what's going on. Here you go. Enjoy. All yours. But that is the way trouble works, right? It flows uphill, up the chain of command. If you can't solve it, tell your boss. And if he can't solve it, he's going to tell his boss. And eventually it'll get to the guy that can't pass it up any higher. And that is Governor Felix right now. Those of you who know the rest of the story know that the emperor is above him, and Paul will eventually appeal to the emperor one step higher. But for now, Governor Felix is at the top of the entire province, and so it's his problem. He would be interested to know that people were trying to subvert Roman justice. They were trying to take the law into their own hands, murder someone in the streets. That's not good. That's not what you want when you're the governor of a province, right? If you're the mayor of a town, you don't want people being executed on the streets of your city without justice, right? That's not good. And so Felix is definitely going to be interested in this case. I sent him to you because I got no idea what's going on, he says. And he told the accusers to present their case in Caesarea to Felix. Maybe Claudius was hoping that with Paul out of the city, they would let it go, right? They were all upset about something, but if I removed him from the city, maybe it will end here. If not, and they go to Caesarea, they're at least not going to be a mob anymore because they're going to have to behave themselves in the provincial capital. Here's the end of it, verses 31 to 33. So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night, brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. So the whole group goes about halfway to Antipatris at night, and then they stop there. The guys on foot walk back to Jerusalem. The guys with a horse continue on to Caesarea, and they hand Paul over to Felix. Now he's his problem. The governor read the letter, asked what province he was from. Learning it was from Cilicia, he said, "I'll hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. The only thing that he really wanted to know aside from what he read in the letter was, where are you from, Paul? I need to know what the jurisdiction is. And knowing that he was from Cilicia, now he knows that's just another Roman province. So as the governor of this province, I can handle the case. I'm not going to make anybody mad. If he belonged to a client kingdom, to one of those kingdoms that's part of the empire, but they still have their own king, one of those kind of things, then he would have to consult that guy first before judgment. So now that he knows he's a Roman citizen, he's from Cilicia, it's my case, I'll handle it when your accusers get here. Because, man, he doesn't know what the charge is. What's going on, right? This is going to have to wait. Keeps him under guard in Herod's palace. That's his headquarters. And, of course, he keeps him under guard for two reasons. Number one, he doesn't want an assassin to sneak into and kill Paul, because they know people already want to kill him. And he doesn't want Paul to abscond, to just walk out and leave. He has no idea what's going on, but it seems like there's something big here. And we will wait and see next week as Paul talks to Felix what's going on. So that was a crazy episode, a conspiracy that unraveled. Paul was saved. What do we take from that? Two simple truths for us, I think. Number one is that evil grows in the shadows and sin blooms in secrecy. We see this all the time in scriptures. We know this in our own lives. When we're doing things in secret, when we are hiding things from other people, 9 times out of 10, it's because we know we ought not be doing it, because we're up to no good. And that's exactly what was happening here. And then secondly, this chapter reminds us that the will of God is not thwarted by the plans of men. As Psalm 2 told us, they conspire in vain. You do not stop the will of God by putting together a secret conspiracy. It ain't going to happen. God had plans for Paul yet, and those plans continued. And so Paul's life was saved here.